All right, let's get started. Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming for today's Forum Ludorum. Woo! Woo! And here we're having my best friend, ft.Lae. And we are actually playing Final Fantasy 14 together.
That's crazy.
And he is RPG. Oh, excuse me, ft.Lae is ft.Lae is. I would say ft.Lae is. ft.Lae is
Lay on these nuts.
ft.Lae is RPG enthusiasm. He
damn it.
plays a lot of. You play every single Final Fantasy, right?
Yes, I did.
Yes, and so, and he is also a developer, mod developer for Skyrim.
Yes.
So oh, you was. All right.
There's never an end in it.
Okay. Okay. Then that's him to talk about RPG, the whole history of RPG. Yeah, he want to do that.
Kinda the whole history. Just
Great.
to look what RPGs are, to explain it, so you get a sense of it. And
All right, then let's welcome him.
okay, hi. Okay, first off, are there spoilers? Do you think there are spoilers? I think not. Maybe. I don't care. Get fucked. And okay. I don't even have notes, so I'm a bit sorry for this. But what I want to talk about is the history of RPGs, as you have heard, and what an RPG actually is, that you will get a sense of it, because it is a genre instead of like a subgenre with special mechanics. And it's like a genre that defines gaming as a whole. And a lot of subgenres evolve from it. So a lot of games are defined as RPG in a subsense. So I have a pretty big topic on my hand, and I just wanted to. How can I do this? Maybe I just talk about the history, and it kind of RPGs are kind of mythical, like a story. So I go, hey, I make the story, and yeah, it's cool. And if you write a thesis, probably you have RPGs in your thesis, and you could use this even, which is cool, right? Maybe I have RPGs in my thesis. So me, who am I? I'm ft.Lae. I'm a programmer. And before this, in this year, there were only game designers who did Forum Ludorum, I think. I don't know. I kind of walk my own path, do my own thing all the time, and I slay. I play a lot of RPGs. As you have heard, I played every single Final Fantasy game, and I always play RPGs, which is very time consuming. And I also modded like Skyrim. I modded in Beyond Skyrim, which is the biggest mod of all time. And there were like thousands of people working on it and going in and go out. And I also worked on Skybliving a bit. So, on the bottom right, you can see me in Final Fantasy 14. Yeah, with my friend. And yeah, that's just cool. That's a pic of me and my friends in game. Yes, please. Yes, do it. The workflow of mods. Okay, you get a taste of mods by firstly just modding the game, okay? And then you get a taste of, hey, maybe I can make my own characters in this game, my own weapons, and then you get to use it, and you kind of publish these mods firstly. But then you get better and better, of course. You make your own assets, and you make bigger mods, and then there are some teams in Discords, for example, in Beyond Skyrim, where you can just apply and work for them. And yeah, they always look for people, and people come in and come out. And modding is much different than in game development, but a lot of modders go into game development because developers are looking into the modders of their own games to hire people. Yes. Okay. like I said, RPGs. There's a lot of to talk about evolution because it spawns a lot of subgenres, and there's a whole tree springing out of it. The first RPG is 49 years old, so the first game RPG, but roleplay itself has a history in human history because it's natural. As you might know, in your first semester, you talk about what is play. So this plays into this, and plays kind of human nature. What we can do, and even like culture could play into play, and role playing in itself is playing. You have theater in the ancient Greek time, and emerging, and also in the ancient Han dynasty, like 2000 years ago, there were like large scale fantasy battles from earlier periods, which was really cool. And this began like large scale role play. So they basically played a game 2000 years ago in real life, which is cool, right? I also want to briefly say board games have a huge influence on RPGs, because from board games, Dungeons and Dragons emerged. And this is, of course, based on chainmail, which is from the 1930s and even earlier, 1900s. And tin soldiers were like big. We as humans like war games, so we kind of simulate war with board games. And of course, chess is, of course, the biggest board game out there. And this influenced how RPGs kind of evolved from it. Like you have a field with squares and all, and then we have the biggest influence on D&D later, Lord of the Rings, but the book, which is, of course, the biggest fantasy book out there. It was made in the 30s and 40s, and it had a lot of influence on what fantasy is. You have orcs, you have elves, and so on. And yeah, there were a lot of oddities at the time because it was like the World War period, and this was different. Yes, please. Okay, it's not the first time it is mentioned. It is rather from other fantasy stories brought together. Some stories in Lord of the Rings are from the Bible itself even, and you have a lot of myths that come together, but Tolkien evolved some stuff in that sense and brought it into one universe, which then later on made D&D, inspired D&D and so on. But as you see, yeah, mythical stuff from our human world also influenced what we play today. So D&D, 1974, a few nerds wanted to make a game, a system, and they wanted to base it on Lord of the Rings because they thought it is cool. So it's the first really commercialized tabletop RPG, and the BA3s have a lot of presentations in 2 weeks, I think, about tabletop RPG systems. And I recommend you to go there because they slay. So D&D, they introduced complicated systems. They were like influenced by chess firstly and chainmail, and it evolved into a system where people can fight and fantasize in. And what is interesting there is there are a lot of stats and levels, and most importantly, characters you can create. And this is the most important part in RPGs, because RPGs are not about the role play itself, but about the characters in them. You should keep that in mind. RPGs are about characters. And D&D spawned a very passionate audience, which led to a lot of nerds. You can see it. Also, nowadays, it leads to pop culture and so on. And this passion led to the first RPGs in the year D&D came out. So it's still 1974. So there were multiple computer clubs actually in like universities that wanted to digitalize their adventures on mainframe computers, but they were still really old, and they just wanted to remake D&D on them, but there was a problem. The first 3 RPGs that exist, they didn't have even names because they only had file names, and no one knows how they how they really were called. And even ChatGPT didn't want to answer me that anymore, so I kind of gave up looking for it. Yeah, but a lot of people don't know this. They needed to delete the files from the mainframe computers because the space they are in was reserved by like the Ministry of Culture in the USA. So yeah, they were deleted, and these games are a myth, a legend, so to speak. The oldest known RPG is The Dungeon, and one of the oldest known RPG without a name were kind of very, very similar apparently to this. So it's basically a copy of it, but The Dungeon is a bit better. So here, what are the characteristics of RPGs as a whole? So you have a lot of storytelling, you have a lot of character development, you have choices and consequences, inventory and equipment, and a lot of stats and levels. And as I said, it's not about the role play, but about the character. And character has kind of a double meaning because you can have character as a person, but also as what the RPG is, how it stands out. It has character. This is also important. There's combat, like in D&D, because it influenced it a lot. Either open worlds or linear progression, a lot of quests and NPCs, character alignment and morality, and role-playing as immersion. There is a problem here because, by definition, a lot of other games are RPGs as well. For example, is The Legend of Zelda an RPG? Because kind of not. It's an adventure, but at the time, it could be seen as an RPG, like when it came out, 1985. But firstly, the early RPGs were very, very difficult because the developers wanted to keep the players engaged. They wanted to have the get more playtime out of the players, and dungeon crawling was still there, and the dungeons were even generated procedurally with AI back then. For example, the Dungeon and Aclabeth did the first procedural generation in any game, and that was 1980. You had save points and passwords still, and there was a lot of grinding, a ton of grinding. Also, permadeath was usual. So the first RPG, Dungeon, and The Dungeon, these were like the first, they were really similar. As you can see, it's still text-based kinda, but you have stats and you are in a dungeon. If you can see it here, this is a dungeon. It's very basic, but you can go into the rooms and all, and you have very simple mechanics, and it's still a dungeon crawler. Cool, right? And also, if anyone wants to talk about their RPGs, if it pops up, please say something so you could like maybe say something yourself. Then we evolve a bit. In 1979, the first RPG with graphics came out. That's like Temple of Apshai. As you can see, the graphics are still very simple. It's pixel art, but it was the first graphics that are out there. So you need game artists now. And it's very simple, and you still need to explore the dungeons everywhere, but it's not in your average CMD, in your command file. And now we come to one of the most influential, no, that's next slide, I'm sorry. Okay, but this is also influential because this Odyssey, the complete adventure, it's misspelled on purpose so they don't get into like troubles for copyright later on. And they had the first overworld. You can see it in the top right. It's very simple. It's just an island, but you can walk on there and walk into the next story mission. It kind of looks ugly, but I think it has a bit of charm for this kind of period. And back then it was puzzle driven, but it is still considered an RPG, even though you have to solve puzzles. But if we have a game like this nowadays, it would be completely a different genre, which is a bit of, yeah, you know what? Okay. is Aklabeth, World of Doom, one of the most influential RPGs, one of the two most influential of the early RPGs. We don't know when it really came out because officially it's 1980, but the maker of Aklabeth, he's very famous. I don't know his name. I forgot. Okay, he states that he did it in summer of 1979 and he kind of just sold it in the garage. So if you know that there's a game in the 70s, you know that you speak of myths, of legends, and you know it is kind of a big deal because early games are really the most influential on the whole gaming eras till now. This is still 44 years ago. So it's the first really explorable open world. As you can remember, we had this island before with puzzles in Odyssey, but here you have a open world for the first time. And later, Aklabeth became Ultima Zero, and it was the first game in the Ultima series, but officially not, but later it was just included in the same world. You have procedural generation in the dungeons. You have first person, as you can see in the bottom right, which is cool, I guess. And player morality and choices were a big thing. Later in Ultima 3, there was very famously permadeath. So you have a party of 4 members, but if someone dies, you kind of have to restart the game so you get them back. So there were like games that were like 140 hours long because of this. So yeah, Ultima is a very hard series in the beginning. So yes, please, what's your question? Well, it's one of the first 3D RPGs, but as you see, it's very simple still in ASCII art. Yes. They really tried, and they did. There's actually an overworld, and you can only see the first person in like a dungeon. So it's kind of both 2D and 3D in the gameplay area. And yeah, it's the first 3D RPG kind of, but you can see a lot of stats are there. Yeah. Yes. He went to space, kind of. He was a space tourist also, so he's kind of rich. Oh God, okay. Okay. Then Rogue, very influential for the roguelike, but this still is listed as an RPG because there wasn't another subgenre. And in Rogue, you had permadeath, so you had to restart the game constantly to make it. It was another dungeon crawler, and it was completely in ASCII art, and procedural generation was a thing which is very important in programming class right now. So we kind of talked about this today, and there was a really dedicated player base because there was a hardcore challenge to this game. So this also influenced kind of the Dark Souls series, and of course other roguelikes. This is where the name comes from, but it's still an RPG, even though you are just like a dot on the map here. But you get the point, I guess. Then the second most important game of early RPGs is the Wizardry series. It was a competition to the Ultima series and a first-person dungeon crawling series game. You were in dungeons, first person. You had a party instead of being alone, like in Aklabeth back then. And there was an overworld, and there were even random encounters. And as you can see on the bottom left, the random encounters kind of, yes, overworld. That's like, okay. in RPGs, you have a map, right? And the overworld is the map of it. Like when you see top down, the character from top down, the map.
Maybe we describe it this way better.
Yeah,
We have in RPG, like even in the tabletop RPG, we call dungeons, right? When you place together, you go to the room by room. That's a dungeon, right? Overworld is somewhere you can identify the. It's like a lobby of the dungeon. So overworld is something like a mini map, and you can see a lot of dungeon on the map. So like a hub.
Yeah.
But and you see yourself as a miniature, and you are walking on the map. Like it is a world map, and you can see there's a mountain, there's a forest, there's a sea, or some water side. So we call it overworld because it's above the ground. And then there's a cave, or we call dungeon, which is underground, and you just go down and to explore. So that's the difference of overworld and dungeon.
Yes, please.
You have separate more most focused encounters or exploring cities and important locations, and the not important part of the world is in between encounters. But in cities, it's the overworld that's kind of more like upscale and just not that kind of
Will you say that? Will you agree with it?
I wanted to get on to that point later when we go to JRPGs.
Yeah, because
it's the influence of it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that will be also an overworld, but in this sense, it's like you roam free, like on the map.
Yeah, actually, you can consider it as kind of like open world. Yes, nothing to enter the dungeon, but this is kind of like open world in a very simple sense.
Okay, yeah, Wizardry. There's an open world, and the random encounters, you can see them on the bottom left, and it was a bit more popular in Japan than in the rest of the world, which plays a big part in how RPGs developed into Western RPGs and Eastern RPGs or JRPGs later. So this is it for early RPGs, but here are three that are also considered like early, and I suggest looking at The Bard's Tale, Wasteland, and Pool of Radiance. Wasteland is the predecessor to Fallout. So, and the old Fallout was also like a top-down RPG series. And but you should consider this term RPG became the term CRPG later, computer RPG. And this is a differentiation of Western RPGs and JRPGs later on. There is a cultural difference between the West and the East because in Japan, technology was different. They still had arcades and computers were unaffordable. So there was an issue to playing RPGs because they were only on computers. That's why the old RPGs became known as CRPGs, computer RPGs, and later on the Japanese RPGs became console RPGs, but they were then called JRPGs because they were only made in Japan back then. Yeah, Japan had arcades first, but then the Famicom was developed, or other consoles before them, but the Famicom is the most
NES. Famicom is NES.
Yes, NES in the West, but Famicom in Japan. And there's, of course, a cultural difference between immersion and storytelling. In Japan, Lord of the Rings and D&D weren't popular at all, so they didn't have really interest in RPGs, really. And what was popular back then was, of course, animes and shonen animes, which have a big influence on RPGs in the East. So now I come to the early JRPGs. We kind of wanted to make a presentation about Western and JRPGs, like the differences, but I kind of made it myself. It's more focused on storytelling. It has often multiple characters because they like telling stories in characters instead of in one person. There are a lot of menus, notoriously. There's an orchestral music. I come to that when Dragon Quest hit. And religion is a big topic because in Japan, they are much more secular, and it was still frowned upon to include religion in games back then. So in Eastern games, you would have controversial topics more, and this is really seeable in the early JRPGs. And at the end of JRPGs, there's a trope that you always fight gods of some sort. Yes, please. Hmm? A JRPG where you don't find God in the end. What is defined as God? Do you know one?
I don't know actually.
Yeah, see?
Like the reason why there's always a godlike being in the JRPG because they have faced it. Like they're facing the situation of nihilism during the 80s and 90s.
It also has to do with Buddhism, like you overcome yourself. So
Yes.
well, I guess it wasn't marketed that way, and in the East they just looked at animes and they thought of it. They're like, it looks stupid. I don't know. If you put something from the West back then in Japan, then I think it wouldn't stay away. But still, back then it was just a book and not a movie. So was it translated in Japanese? I don't know. Could be.
Like so you want to ask the difference about the storytelling between West and East?
Western culture and Japanese culture, they bring it more into this version, more individualistic and all that kind of stuff. And like
Because yes, Buddhism indeed influenced the but I think there's a nature in Western is to have immerse, to have a reality in the virtual world. That it's kind of a part of the nature of the Western culture. That stuff on Greece, you want to have an accurate line. You want to have everything is clear and it's just like a copy of the real world. So you are want to paint it real, but it's not case in Japan or in Eastern, like from China. It's just, we don't really need to draw something real, represent the real thing. We just want to have the sense. So you can see in later pages, you can see how Japanese adapt the fantasies. Like in fantasy in Western, it's very cruel. It's very hard. There's a lot of things you cannot survive in the forest, but that's not the case in Japan.
Yes. I want to talk about the rise of the JRPG. It's about Square and Enix separate. So like I said, D&D was not popular, but Wizardry was kind of popular in Japan. But still, a lot of people couldn't play this, but because there weren't many people with a PC, but still, Wizardry was more popular than the other RPG. So there was Yasuhiro Fukushima. He studied architecture.
Yes, I know.
Kind of nods to you, and he wanted more freedom and control, and he kind of made this company for advertising, but later he wanted to make games because they were popular in arcades. and he wanted to make a programming contest. And in this programming contest was specially designed to search for game programmers, and it was advertised in mangas, which is important because this contest influenced how JRPGs kind of evolved. Because later on, we have one of the most influential JRPGs, Dragon Quest, the first one in 1986 now by Enix. So earlier RPGs like the RPGs were too arcadey for like to see. Oh my God, moment. A lot of games from Japan were still too arcadey, like The Legend of Zelda. Like you run around and you stab people, but you could still have it on an arcade. So they wanted to combine this with Wizardry of all games and make a game on the NES on the Famicom, a simple game which has like only like 2 buttons and so a D-pad basically. So they wanted to bring the RPG to Japan, and they made this with Dragon Quest. 3 people here are important. But firstly, there were of course hardware limitations. You could only have 1 main character and not like a full party like in Wizardry. But later on, this got resolved in other Dragon Quest titles. And they wanted to make a simple story. You just save the princess from the evil lord.
Excuse me, just go back to the previous page. One.
Previous page.
That's what I said. In Japan, they will simplify a lot of things with fantasy things from Western. Like, do you know what it is? This character?
Yes. The iconic slime.
It is slime, and it is cute, and that's how Japan adapted Western fantasies. Yes.
It's blue, and all the slimes are blue. I didn't see any. It's not the first slime, but it was adapted to be like more Japanese and more based on kamis of Shintoism. Yes, it's the ghost or gods.
Kami is more like a god, not ghost.
Some are ghosts.
Ghost has another word for it.
Yokais.
Yokai, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or we call the ghost in the shell in later yokai. And so what I just want to say is before Dragon Quest, the slime doesn't depict like this. Slime is a very strength and a very dangerous monster, and you are going to it's going to kind of like fuse your bones and skins together to eat you, kind of like that way.
Nom, 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 nom.
Yes, so it's very different because
yes. Okay, 3 persons here are very important. Yuji Horii, he's kind of seen as the god of programming in Japan because he made the first JRPG, and he's very famous. He won that Enix contest and went to like America to like a Apple show, and this is where he really played Wizardry and where he kind of got the idea. Then we have Akira Toriyama, which had a small side project next to this game called Dragon Ball. So he got into the team by this the advertisements in mangas, and then later on he made the advertisements himself. He made the characters and the entire art style of the game, so you can kind of see if you Google Dragon Quest, it kind of looks like Dragon Ball. Hey, cool. Then we have Koichi Sugiyama. He's a composer, and I think because they have a composer on the team, this is why we have very orchestral music in JRPGs now. His music is more like epic, like a lot of horns and trumpets, and it's very pumptious. But then, could we? I don't know. How much time do we have?
Because you have too many things, can we listen about it during the break?
Okay. But there was another company called Square, and they kind of wanted to make their own game. They kind of had some other games like tennis games, but they were all unimportant. Final Fantasy, everybody knows it, or at least the name, and it was developed in 1987. And it has the name because it was the last game of Hironobu Sakaguchi. He just wanted to leave, and he said, "This is my last game in the game industry," and they kind of went along with him and funded him to like death. So it was also the last. It would be the last game of the company even because they went all out on him, and he wanted to make with a team of 7 a competition to Dragon Quest. They were influenced by Dragon Quest, and they wanted to have the opposite. Dragon Quest never left Japan, and it never had like international
Global release.
a global release or even recognition even. So they wanted a competition, and they wanted to have it completely different. First, you have a party of characters. You have it in Dragon Quest 2 already, but in Final Fantasy, you have it from the beginning. You have not a simple story, you have a complex story this time. And in the first game, you have a mindfuck time loop that doesn't make sense, but it's still complex. And you can see on the screen, it has nice graphics, NES graphics. Isn't that great? But now, what is different, Dragon Quest had like a childish theme, childish art, but this time it's much more mature, and there's a lot of death, there are dragons and so on. Famously, there's a job system, which made, he wanted to say something.
Is there anyone knows what is job systems?
Damn.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Right? All those games, your characters, you could basically choose a character class, right?
Yes, but that's what we want to talk. I want to talk about, like, what's the difference between job and class job and class.
Well, it might be a mistranslation, but
Features the class, so kind of first you become like but then like the next features with the class.
Yes, that's the point.
yes,
Yes.
you can
You want? Okay, you go first.
you can level up your jobs and get like the spells of a job, but it's basically classes if you define it like this. But if you change it again, then you still have the spells, and you can just like every character has their own job, and you can just switch them during gameplay.
Yes, that's a very I think it's a very fundamental difference between West and East, because in a way it's just like you're playing pokes. Once you have the poke, once you have a card, then your destiny is kind of decided. What you can play is the cards in your hands. But in Eastern, they have mahjong. Mahjong is something that come in and out. So that's what I say in job system. It's something that comes in and you can change it.
The class is fixed and the job is
Flexible.
Yeah. Also, Final Fantasy doesn't have a medieval theme, but more of a science fantasy theme. Can I spoil this?
Yes, you can, but we don't have time.
The second to last dungeon in Final Fantasy 1 is a space station, so that's cool. It has a bit of science fantasy theme in every single game. Maybe not everyone, but every single one. But you can kind of
almost everyone.
Yeah, but every single one is a different universe, and some are more into science fiction and science fantasy, and some are more fantasy heavy. The music also plays a big role. Our beloved music teacher loves the music. David Marlowe loves the music of Final Fantasy. It is very calm and not pompous. It has a lot of harps and violins, and instead of like trumpets and horns. And because it is calm, there's also a bit of an antithesis of the epic story and the calmness. Yeah, and Final Fantasy is the most influential JRPG of all time in the series. the professional here might have seen this is not Final Fantasy 1 anymore, but Final Fantasy 4. This release as Final Fantasy 2 in the West, and a lot of early releases didn't come out in the West. And there was a competition between Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy who got like who becomes the favorite child of Nintendo, because both Square and Enix wanted to be published by Nintendo in the West, so they get international recognition, and Final Fantasy got it. So they got much more popular internationally than Dragon Quest, but Dragon Quest was still more popular in Japan. And with Final Fantasy IV, we enter the SNES era. But I want to go back to Western RPGs a bit. The 90s were a bit difficult because there were a lot of FPS and fighting games instead of RPGs because they were seen as too hard. The audience became a bit more casual, and RPGs became a lot more difficult to like program. You had first-person RPGs back then, but they took more years than like fighting games, so it wasn't profitable to make it. So there was a lot of development in it, but a lot of people are still enthusiastic to it. And yeah, the 90s were difficult because the Western audience was still more in FPS like Doom or fighting games. And you didn't see it really in computers that a lot of RPGs were there back then. But still, there are some examples of what RPGs came out in the 90s. You see the emergence of Diablo, so the emergence of the action RPG, Fallout, and Baldur's Gate. But now I want to come to the high area of the JRPG, the 90s, the SNES, the PS1, and the Sega Saturn era. Because Western RPGs weren't that popular or didn't even exist at all, the JRPG became popular instead because they were the RPGs, but they were much more focused on characters. So here we have a dominant monopoly on the RPG genre, but in a different sense, because they more and more early JRPGs got released in the West, and they become popular because of dark themes that Japan still does. So I want to talk about Final Fantasy VI now. It's considered the high point of 2D JRPGs and the high point of Final Fantasy as a series. And this is seen as the last classic game, the last 2D game of Final Fantasy, because they kind of evolve with the genre. What I think, it started like the golden age in 1994 by having a really good story, and they have a character-focused storytelling. This was the case in Final Fantasy IV before. They had character-focused storytelling, but they perfected it in Final Fantasy VI. You have action all the time, and this really became very popular in the West. And this started like the golden age, where JRPGs had worldwide popularity. Also before that, there was round-based combat in JRPGs, but with Final Fantasy V, something changed. They had the ATB gauge, which is like a timer that is running until you can attack. So the fighting systems of these games changed by not being round-based, but time-based, so to speak. And yeah, this game kind of perfected it, and you should play it. Then a game which I love and adore with a lot of character. You have to stand out if you want to make an RPG now. So it was really unusual to have an RPG that isn't either fantasy or science fiction back then. But with Earthbound, you have something that is settled in the real world in modern times. And it's one of the quirkiest games ever if you played it. It's part of the Mother series. You can still see that 2 of the 3 mother games weren't released in the West. So this was called Earthbound in the West, even though it is Mother 2 in Japan and so on. There's a lot of cultural references. It's disruptive and has a cult following, which is very prevalent and very important to have when you make RPGs. You have to make your followers really follow you like a cult. And this influenced a lot of cool games like Undertale and Omori. So there's a lot of potential for indie games there. Yes, please. I don't know, Homestuck. Nice. Let's go. Play this. Okay. Damn. Okay. Then next to Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger is seen as one of the best games on the SNES. I recently began playing it for this presentation, so I can get more of an overview of what this is. And it's really good. It has multiple endings, which was a bit unusual back then still, and a time travel system. You kind of have a complex story about time travel, and you change the world accordingly on what you do. And you have another system which influenced later JRPGs and RPGs as a whole. The ATB system of like the Final Fantasy games got expanded upon, and you now have to look at where you fight, because the room isn't random encounters start where the camera is, and there are now hitboxes instead of just enemies. So you can miss even some enemies if you have obstacles. And there was a collaboration of the creators of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest to make this game. So this became a big deal later on. This led to basically Square buying Enix later to merge into Square Enix later on.
I think this part needs to be verified. It is a very important thing.
Okay. Bro, no.
It's a very important system.
Tutorial.
I think this one is good.
Good music. Where's the main? That's the DS version. So
How it enters the file.
up down? No, I don't know.
Enter.
Might have to look back on gameplay.
It was in the video I sent.
Are you seeing the video instead?
No.
Okay, maybe here.
Spoilers. Spoilers. Oopsie.
Find gameplay videos.
Are you winning?
Hello, my YouTube brothers, me and the Dreams. This Drummer. So now we're at a reptile lair, trying to get it back. What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this?
Look.
Something in the air.
I'm not sure if you have just doesn't say it.
What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this?
But how does this impact the gameplay though? Yeah.
It's still an ATB round-based system, but
There's something in it.
do you want to say something?
Okay, I want to say is you can avoid monster by goes
Ooh.
around it.
That's crazy.
Yes,
Mhm.
you can just go around it. And the most important thing is when you trigger or you collide with the monster, and then where your all characters position is your fighting position.
It's not random anymore. A bit, yeah. They have like they have hitboxes in their attacks, and for example, you have a flamethrower. So and this goes a line, and if the enemies aren't are in a line, you can hit all of them, and the enemies move in the space also.
What do you want to ask?
Yes.
Yes, kind of. So what? So you have to kind of decide your position of yourself. So when you collide with the monster, you know you can just go around it with it and try to position yourself somewhere else. Okay. Yes.
Oh no.
Oh no. Excuse me, I didn't know that.
Yes.
You can try to avoid most of the live in between, but then the battle is always going to happen.
Yes. Beautiful art, right? Oh no. Bye bye. Oh yeah, I didn't play this series, but I was hoping somebody else played Persona or one Persona, but this is the first slide where I wanted to talk about more about a series as a whole, but because this is now very famous under JRPGs, Persona 5, and it derivated from Shin Megami Tensei in the series, and it was influenced by high school animes instead of shonen animes. And it has a mechanic of social simulation and time management, and there were of course a lot of psychological themes and dark storytelling. Hello. Okay. Yeah, we need time. Okay. A lot of RPG enthusiasts were they kind of saw that something will change in the future. We have the PS1 now, and the PS1 it kind of allows for external saving of data. So you have a memory card now, and you can use multiple disks to have a larger game. And this led to the first 3D JRPG to hit the market, which is Final Fantasy VII, one of the most highly anticipated games and most influential JRPGs ever. And yes, it had topic of eco-terrorism on a planet that is dying, which is very, very relevant now. It also is one of the first JRPGs with an expanded universe outside of the game, and there is of course a following cult. This game is of course very known, right?
Just add some number. If it sells 500,000 copies in the first month.
Yeah.
Only in Japan.
And this is one of the first games that were on multiple discs. So you had like 3 CDs, and if you played through one, you can save your data on the memory card of the PS1 and then load it back in onto the second disc. So this was a new technology which allowed for 3D games now, for polygons.
in the same year, Diablo also released, which takes, I think, a year to reach 500,000 copies sale.
The golden age. Oh yeah, the golden age is over. Okay, there was then a downturn in RPGs in the PS2 and Sega Dreamcast era, which was kind of weird. Of course, there was Final Fantasy 8 and 9 on the PS1 still, and some other games, but I skip a bit. So we have the PS2 era now, and now what was they wanted to evolve the JRPG genre into more of an action game, into action games, because they want to have the Western market, which is still much more action orientated. They still, yes, please. Yes.
It is. It is.
Yeah, Diablo made the ARPG, the action RPG genre, but action in RPGs is now a common thing. So the genre name might be a bit flawed now. They had Baldur's Gate and every single game which derivated from D&D, Neverwinter and so on. But still, RPGs had a downturn with this era. Also, the Dreamcast came out and was $600, which at the time was much more than $600 was now. And this played a big theme in it. And the GameCube was kind of shit, more or less. And there was a phenomenon that overworlds just died out, and that JRPGs had more of a linear story in the PS2 era. Okay, here's one good example of how the Dreamcast failed. The first MMO JRPG, Phantasy Star Online. Maybe you heard of it. It was very ambitious, and actually it was kind of good, and it still has a cult following. What I want to say here is that the MMO, of course, is the evolution to the RPG, but the failure of this game came from the failure of the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast was the first console with like online play, but it still had high cost of $600 or euros even, and but it still set stage for the design of future MMOs on consoles. You can still see that a lot of Japanese MMOs firstly develop on consoles, and they kind of look at the design of Phantasy Star Online. Then the last Final Fantasy game I want to talk about is Final Fantasy X, because you can see here how it developed in this era. Graphics now are HD, which is crazy. Oh, you can have cinematics now and have a movie-like storytelling instead of just playing with polygon graphics. But this game is very popular, but it was very different. It had a very linear story, but it didn't have an overworld. So a lot of people thought that they were kind of constrained to the story. You kind of just run through it and you're just done with the game instead of backtracking and all. And what a lot of people pissed off was that there was no more world map. Never again. And
the world map means the overworld map.
Yes, the overworld. So this era is kind of reminiscent of, you have a map, but you just click on it and you fast travel to it instead of just walking on the world map. Then a lot of games wanted to have action in them, and Kingdom Hearts is basically the high point of this era, and kind of seen also as the end point of the golden era of the JRPG. So there is a legend that a Disney executive and the Square executive at the time, they met in an elevator randomly, and then yeah, and they kind of said, "Yo, we want to make a game. Can we work together?" So they made a JRPG which mixed Disney characters together with Final Fantasy mechanics and Final Fantasy storytelling, and they made Kingdom Hearts for the PlayStation 2. And because Disney is very popular in the West, but also in the East, and particularly China also, I think, right?
Kind of.
Kind of, yeah. JRPGs got really, really popular again with this in this era. But this also led to kind of a downfall of the genre, because no one could reach this point anymore at that time. Yeah, cool, right? But then, yes.
Maybe
Break?
we have
Break?
let's have a break. Yeah.
Okay, break.
Let's have a 10 minutes break, and then we come back to how Western RPG revived.
Yes. That's awesome. Yeah, it's fun. Yes.
Didn't work.
Wow.
C, almost 70.
Oh, I'm 69, exactly. You know me.
The rest will be back faster.
That's good.
We are
Russian.
we are 42. We are 42.
42 of 69.
I know there's still a lot. Keep going. Yeah, I think we can start. I don't know.
Where to start?
Yeah, we can start. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, people. Come back. Anyway. Thank you for staying. Let's start our next session.
Hey, it's me again. Okay, we entered the 2000 area, but now we look at the Western RPG side. And what happened was that Lord of the Rings, the book, got a movie. Can you believe this? And then a lot of people wanted that this movie becomes a game so they can interact with it in an interactive medium. And this made a lot of RPGs very popular, and there was a really high demand on it, of course. And then, as you might hear from the music, something happened. And one of the first computer RPGs that were in the 3D era was the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind, and a lot of people thought that this looks like Lord of the Rings. I want to play it. It also derivated from D&D, like the entire world is basically a homebrew D&D world. So yeah, that's cool. So because it came out at the right time in 2002 when the demand was high, and because it was basically the first modern RPG, it became really influential. And as you can see, it's first person and it has a lot of action, and every single attack is a dice roll still. So very famously, a lot of people fail like attacking a mud crab and die. And this is really funny. It has a distinct feel, which is now important in RPGs because otherwise it would be very stale. And because of this alien, it standed out. I wanted to play this. Also, it's immersive as fuck, and every NPC is killable, so you could fuck up the story and have a lot of RP in it. And yeah, then a bit of pop culture happened with an MMO. There was a demand to play Morrowind online or play a Lord of the Rings game online, but or something similar. And then World of Warcraft came. There should be a Forum Ludorum on MMOs formed by someone at some point. But this also came at the perfect time in 2004, when the internet now became like more in the hands of the consumers. It became cheaper, but there was still an entry, and everyone kind of talked about this because it was it had a much higher standard than other games at the time, and the art style of it was very timeless. Yeah, pop culture is because a lot of news agencies talk negatively about it, that this game makes everyone into game junkies. So everybody wanted to try it, of course. And that's how it exploded. And yeah, it was $12 a month. It was still a bit high for this time, but it was much cheaper than maybe other games for this time. So the entry is a bit high in terms of having internet, but a lot of players just got it. So yes. Then, which is interesting, is the Mass Effect series. Because as I said, the Western audience. Hi. Nothing. It doesn't say alien pussy at the slide. No. Western audience are still into action and like into first-person shooters, and Mass Effect was kind of the first RPG to kind of bring action first-person shooters together with the RPG, and kind of got popular because of that. And people got into the game because they expected action, but they actually got an RPG, and they really enjoyed having an RPG and got into the genre itself. Also, it had a dark theme, and you could romance some characters, which was unusual at the time. And Iowa became very popular because of mature themes and mature scenes. So the first sci-fi RPG was also in the 70s. Like text is also kind of science fiction and fantasy kind of coexisted because fantasy was more popular. Also, this is relevant in this time because Star Wars and Star Trek were really like popular in the zeros. You missed 3 slides. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, we talked about Morrowind, World of Warcraft, and now Mass Effect. Also, it says alien pussy on the slide. Very academic, right? Yeah, Star Wars and Star Trek were popular at the time because you had the prequel trilogy, and they kind of cashed into that together with the action-oriented RPG series. So it paid out. People love this trilogy. You should play the Legendary Edition. It's the entire trilogy, but not Mass Effect Andromeda. But nobody cares about that game, so I think it's 80 euros right now if you pay in euros. 8 something, I think. I don't know. Play it. Very good. Yeah, I had 3 examples in the West for this time because Western RPGs kind of got big because of pop culture. But in the East, there was a bit of staleness, like I said, of this PS2 era, but they still had cool stories, and JRPGs were more focused on the handhelds of Nintendo, like the GBA and the DS. So they made more remakes than new games, and the systems of the JRPGs were still a bit older back then. So there was not a lot of innovation, but still there are some game series that define this era, and I think they are still cool. Okay, here I put this here because I think the Tales series is very reminiscent of this era, because most of the games in this series came out at the time. The first game of it, so every game of the series is called Tales of and then something. The first game, Tales of Fantasia, kinda also influenced the action RPG genre, modern RPGs, because it has a linear motion battle system, or LIMS, and you kinda could only control the main character on a linear path first in the 2D games, and you could attack enemies with buttons, and your party members were controlled by an AI agent, and they could help you, support you, or attack yourself, which influenced how the RPG is played today. It took a bit of time to the transition to 3D for the series. It was kind of this time, and nowadays you see in a lot of JRPGs this exact system. Like, I don't know, Xenoblade or Tales of Arise. I even began playing Tales of Arise because of this presentation to have a better view on it. But you can see a lot. I put not only one game in there, but the whole series. So I only played Arise, but I looked at the Twitch stream, which played kind of all Tales games like 10 years ago, and I liked the edge of Berseria, and I wanted to play after Arise. So, and I think this would be like the third most important contender for JRPGs next to Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy.
You wanna show the battle system?
We can if you want to.
I wanna show because it's really cool.
Yes. Yes, they developed into a third-person action overworld thingy by time. Also, the series is based on shonen animes, and you have anime cutscenes, like, and it plays into the tropes all the time. Yes, all the time there's a cutscene. I can just think of Arise. It's the one from 2021. It has a real feel of tomorrow. You see at bottom left, you click a button, and then the characters make moves. Hmm? Genshin might be inspired by this. Can you finish the Tales of Fantasia?
Azure Storm! Wind! Devastation! Big Falcon! Dragon Swarm!
1995. Two games were available. You control the main character and jump. And, the AI controls kind of the party members. Yeah. I'm something. Yes. Yes, this game has 17 titles, but most of them weren't released in the West, so there were fan translations, and it still shows that a lot of series weren't released here, which is kind of crazy. And I think this has a lot of potential to like be like a main series. Not many people know about this, I think, outside of experts in games and JRPGs. Yeah, this time was also very dominant with Pokemon, which defined the monster catching genre, which is a subgenre of the JRPG. And this would mean that the largest franchise which ever existed is an RPG, a JRPG, which is cool. It must be mentioned. And of course, in the handheld era, Pokemon kind of built upon what a handheld is, and a lot of people played it on the playground. Yes. Yes. You don't play Ash. You could see like the badges as your levels. Or yeah.
You know what it means
But
about
you don't
it's
need
about
the main
stories.
character to have levels. You just need levels as a whole, like for monsters. And yeah. Also, you can have the Pokemon types like kind of as classes, and this place is really influenced from D&D back then or other JRPGs. So this counts as a JRPG subgenre. And Michu wanted to talk about cassette bees, and so nowadays somebody should make an own Forum Ludorum about monster catching. And yeah. Cassette Bees is a cool game. The main characters have their levels, and they kind of transform into the monsters, which is different than in Pokemon. Yes, but it's cool. Make your own Forum about it. What is influential or was very influential at the time was RPG Maker games. So JRPGs are very easy to make because they were easy at the beginning. You had a console which was very limited in its hardware, so this is an easy genre to make. So a lot of people wanted to make a fantasy world, and a lot of people, maybe from us even, me, began with an RPG maker to make a world. And a lot of games came out from this in this era. And early YouTube had a lot of videos on RPG Maker games because of the Let's Plays, and it kind of cashed into this, and a lot of self-developed games came from it, which are cool. Yes.
I know the game's already older, but like I'm finishing Fear and Hunger playthroughs right now. It's like this bit older RPG Maker game. It's basically like Souls-like inspired. They have like a run through super dark fantasy world, stuff happening all around you, and yeah, the only thing you get from each one is knowledge, basically. So if you die, you die. Yeah, just people actually step on the tile. It's the rusted nail in your foot. You have 5 rounds and find some hidden items.
Oh no.
Like encounter conflict and have to be conscious of what is fight. It's like super punishing and a bit frustrating, I guess, but it's really interesting. This game is basically the manager who says gets half the job obligations throws up both noise we don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's not.
Yeah. Also, what I want to say with this is a lot of people do different genres than just JRPGs with the RPG Maker. So you kind of have a spawner of games that in this genre. So you could make a detective story, a vampire action story, and so on. So even JRPGs are like RPGs, just genre spawners. You can do anything. So it's a big topic. And a question: what is the most popular RPG of all time? That's crazy. It fits into the time. Hey. Yeah. Skyrim. I made Skyrim mods, and this came out on 11/11/11. So they always have like quirky dates, and it goes fully onto immersion. And like Morrowind, it builds upon its reputation and on first person. But what is most prevalent in this game is, I wonder why it didn't do much. Or instead of Radiant AI, maybe.
We have to choose.
Yeah. Radiant AI. It's a topic in my programming class. I have to present it later. So Oblivion made Radiant AI, but Skyrim improved it because it behaved weird. Very famously, very weird. So they have NPCs now that kind of can act on their own. They have their own routines and own behaviors. And in Oblivion, they all killed each other and talked weird stuff, but now they don't do it anymore. So immersion is really good. And what's most prevalent in Skyrim is that modding is really, really easy. And now you have like 2 billion downloads on Nexus mods, for example. And yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about modding. Yeah. Yeah. Modding can be a bit really weird at some times because this is not made by game developers. It's just by people who want to have fun or that are horny. So you have endless content because you can just download mods and have new games. And you can adjust by the player's needs. There are a lot of game opportunities to get game developers into your team, and it's an easy entry into game development as a whole. I have a few funny pictures there, and yeah. I have also 2 examples of mods that became a bit bigger, that really stand out. I have Enera as a example of a mod. This is a full conversion. This is an entire differently game in Skyrim. You can get it for free on Steam if you have Skyrim or Skyrim Special Edition. And it's one of the best games I've ever played because it's a very, very dark story. And it's made by the team of 20 people. And they don't have a profit, I expect, because they don't care about profit, only about Patreon. And yeah, the modding community can just make entirely new games out of another game. Then a second example of modding, which became a full standalone game, is the Forgotten City. It was a mod first. You ventured into a Dwemer city and had to like solve a riddle or solve what is happening there. There is a time loop, and they kind of made it into a game in the Roman time, and it's really good, and it has really good storytelling in terms of history. You will definitely learn something about history when you play this game. And this came out as a mod first, and then was developed into a full standalone game, which kind of shows you what game development can do when you work in a modding team. That was my 2 examples. So we go into a new era. There's new popularity in RPGs. Because of the acceptance of games as a medium. You can now study games, for example. And JRPGs became much more popular now because the handhelds get better and you can have more new systems now. Also, the internet became popular, so you have globalization and more free ads for like games that didn't came out in the West. So that's cool, I guess. Money came in and games became more into pop culture. One game which I want one series even that is a good example is the Nier series, which came from the Drakengard series. A lot of people here got into JRPGs because of Nier Automata or just Nier Replicant. And this is an interesting JRPG because it doesn't give you immersion. It kind of punches you in the face because it gives you real topics about what life is, and it gives you a personal dilemma of what intelligence is, what is the meaning of life, and so on. It also has a interesting approach in storytelling because it was developed from the end to the beginning and not the other way around. And Yoko Taro, the game designer, was very famous for it. Yes. No. The design is from end to beginning. No.
I would say the story of this genre, or maybe this game, is more like
Fucked up.
not fucked up. I would say from the structures wise.
Okay.
It's more like a visual novel in Japan. And in visual novel Japan, you usually you have to play multiple times. So most of the information it's just like one single visual novel, like you just play it once, and second time will have a different story. And the third time is another different story. So you just keep playing, and there will be a different story coming up. Yes.
Yes.
I'm not sure about that.
Kinda.
Yoko Taro doesn't have. I mean, maybe
He is unstable.
yes.
There's an answer of Yoko Taro, and he said, "I just like girls." Yes. Yeah, Nier Replicant has 5 endings. There's also Nier Gestalt, which has a different main character. Don't play this one. This is only for Xbox. They had like a Pokemon approach where you have 2 different versions, but now you can just play Replicant on Steam, where you get the real story. It has 5 endings, and Nier Automata has 26 endings, of which 5 are like in the main story. The other ones are like jokes, so to speak. Yes.
Keep going.
Another interesting series is the Fire Emblem series. It's kind of like a CRPG, but now because of pop culture, because it was included in Smash back then, the West kind of wanted to this released in the West because they don't know this genre, they don't know what this series is about, and it's a tactical RPG, but it was really, really difficult because there was permadeath still. And it kind of became more popular when there was a mode where permadeath is disabled. But what's interesting here is that this is now kind of like D&D, but from the East, which wasn't really popular back then, but now it got popularized. And this was really cool, and I just wanted to include it because it's cool. Yeah. Also, it has a social aspect since like 2012, and you kind of can befriend characters, have like scenes, and this in particular influenced the Tales series and the Persona series later on. I recently played Octopath Traveler, which I have found to be really cool. It's 2D and 3D, and this game is now used to mod old 2D games into this art style, and I just like the art style because it has a lot of potential. And the storytelling is here also a bit different. You have 8 characters, and each of them has a different story. And if you finish the game, there might be a hidden after story, a 9th chapter, so to speak. And yeah, it got inspired by the graphics of Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger. So you kind of go back into JRPGs now with modern stuff. Then, back into Western RPGs. We have a pop culture emergence again because of The Witcher. It got a Netflix series also because of this. And yeah, You know the drill. Can I skip this? Time. Hey! Do you wanna say something? Yes, play it. Best game ever. Okay. Disco Elysium is a AA game, not a AAA game, and it has a famous story of how it got stolen from from a capitalist investor, and there were like two main developers, and they kind of make the game based around socialism, and they didn't have a capitalist mindset, so they kind of just went wild, and the investor didn't care. And now you have a story that kind of revolves around what socialism is, and this really stands out in the crowd. It's yes. Yes. It's also a lot more text-based than usual RPGs. It was a book. There is a book. Yes. Damn, bro. Yeah.
Excuse me, we have 5 minutes left.
Nice. Yes, very important. Play this game. Hey, COVID happened. It's 2020 now. People are in their houses, kind of quarantining. So a lot of people play RPGs online, tabletop RPGs, and they play D&D online. So a lot of popularity came back into RPGs. So yes, and it's probably not the last pandemic. Get fucked. So RPGs will always be more popular in these times. And then from CDPR, we had a guest lecture out of it. Cyberpunk 2077 came out in 2020, but it fell a bit flat because a lot of people expected like an action-oriented game still, but they got an RPG. But it was more because of the bugs and not because of the story. This is still a very great game in role-play aspects, but a lot of people want it to be quicker and all. It's very moddable, and it's cool, yeah. And because of pop culture, it kind of got overhyped. So you have a bit of a negative when you create hype. So yeah. And it was buggy as fuck. Hey, hey, this is the game of the year. Everybody agrees. Okay, everybody should play this. It's basically the return of the CRPG, and I think CRPG doesn't mean computer RPG anymore, but classic RPG. Yes, please. Huh? I played the Dark Urge. Do you wanna know what happens?
Please keep going.
It's a bit okay. No, yeah, you have a lot of choices in this game, and this game developed for 7 years. It's highly anticipated sequel to the Baldur's Gate series, which came out in the 90s, of course, 1997 and 98, I think. So it was like 25 years.
1999, 1998.
Yeah, something like that. It's 25 years ago. I know because I'm old now. There was hype around D&D because of the pandemic, of course. So a lot of people wanted to play this. There was an early access, and a lot of people thought it was good. And yeah, because of the pandemic, you have D&D, and because of D&D, you have a lot of hype in this, and you can play for over 80 hours because there was a lot of enthusiasm that went into creating these games. Also, it's very moddable, and you can do homebrew in it, which might be a bit more relevant in the future when actually homebrew arrives with this game. Yes. Yes, I needed 84 for one playthrough. Good for you. I'm proud
Excuse
of you.
me, just we need to finish the slides first. We need to finish the presentation first.
Okay, other RPGs to consider. Kingdom Come Deliverance, it's a historical first-person action RPG. Because it is historical, it is very, very realistic, more or less. But it's really cool, so you should consider playing it. Dark Souls is made by a Japanese developer, so some people meme about it that it's a JRPG, but it's a Souls-like game, of course. Yeah, but it's a JRPG. Ni no Kuni, it brought back the world map in modern JRPGs, and it's made by Studio Ghibli, so it has a Ghibli art style, which is cool. And yeah, because it brought back the world map, it was kind of influential in the modern times. Mount & Blade, it's a tactical RPG, but it's very procedural, kind of, and you can role play. Yes, but I put it in because it's different than others. And now you have like mods that put in large language models, so you can just talk with every NPC, and every NPC is different. So that's cool. Kenshi, that's a very made by one developer, and this is purely procedural generated, and you have a lot of crazy stories going into it. It's ugly as fuck, but everything can happen in it. So you can just wake up, lose a leg, and become a necromancer. But you can also like get an entire team, an entire bandit camp, and you control them all, which is cool. Also, Genshin Impact is now the biggest game. It's considered a JRPG, but it's a bit different. I know we had a Genshin Forum Ludorum last semester. So yeah, you get a point, get out there and take a look. The future. I think that AI will play a role in NPC generation and generation as a whole, but I think AI is a tool of creating, being creative, but it dominates writing right now. So there are a lot of protests and writers associations right now because of this. So this will play a huge role in gaming. So I told you in Mount & Blade, there's now a mod of procedural NPCs or large language models, which is cool. Stats and numbers can be just made by the AI, so it scales. And this might probably be relevant. And because of the increased productivity, a lot more indie devs can make RPGs now because it's a game genre which requires a lot of time, but you will probably see a lot of smaller RPGs now. And because of COVID, there's a rise of China. They funded like a lot of game studios, but more like bigger ones because they wanted to like keep the people in. So there will be probably a rise of Chinese indie games soonish, and they make RPGs. And my Chinese friends send me them and say, "Hey, look!" And then they have overwhelmingly positive feedback on Steam. Yeah, and I'm like, "What the fuck? Why don't I know this?" Yeah, how to make an RPG? I don't know. Use a tabletop system, write a novel, create a lot of characters, and do stuff that's cool. I read this cool book there are some lenses, like what are the most important ones. This book is 600 pages long. I just put ChatGPT in what is most important in like RPGs. So storytelling, character, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Maybe we should see video games, game RPGs as systems rather than just games. Because the first RPGs were basically homebrew D&D, and they still are. So homebrewing and modding kind of plays into the trope of making a game, and games itself were kind of a bit of stolen from D&D, and you can still see the world they play in as a system of D&D, and you should rather see it as a system and try to look at how the player plays in it, how the player and the characters live in it. Okay, that's it. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Lae. And it's time for today. It's already past 2 minutes, and
Oops.
thank you for coming. That's the end of the day. Thank you.
Yay. I said once in a brief sentence, there's Baldur's Gate and never wins, so that's cool, right?
Okay.
Done. A bit much, right? A bit much, right?
I mean,
Was it fun? Wow. They liked it.
I don't know.
More or less.
mean,
Informative. It was
It's
old school
more
stuff.
fan service.
I know.
Like if you mention some games that like or like being played, they will be hyped. If not, they're just kind of sleepy until the time is.
Sorry. I love content.
Introducing all the games that are influential, or talking about the theory of what is the RPG, how to make RPG.
I would just.
It's hard to.
No,
Big topic.
There's so many games. They talk about so many games. There's no that. I'm not going to talk. Of course, I'm not going to talk about series of the game. Like in the previous, I don't talk about series of the game too. I just talk about specific game and dive into it and see what system is good.
Yeah, you could maybe like these many games, maybe explore deeper into the world. Okay, I will. It's
Like what I said. I mean, comparing Final Fantasy VI and Baldur's Gate is actually very quite good.
Maybe.
But
for the next time. Part 2.
Part 2.
I'm ready to do it myself. You don't know how deep I want.